We'll see if I can get the camera to pick up. So again, according to the syllabus, I put the disclaimer in there that this course is broadcast on YouTube, and it looks like the camera's not gonna follow me. Oh, I may have to manually do this.
So that means if we miss something in class, we can watch it like on YouTube.
Yeah, sure can. Absolutely. This, by the way, is like a tort waiting to happen right there, isn't it? Standing on the chair and it's got words on it. Okay. All right, so for those of you that came in again, I mentioned this last time, it's in the syllabus that this class is recorded and broadcast. That's for your benefit, unless of course you're in the witness protection program, in which case it's not gonna work out so well for you, so avoid the camera. Get here early, sit in the back corner over there where you're not gonna be picked up, and facial recognition is not gonna feed your identity into something that the mob can find you or whoever it is that you're hiding from. If that's a problem, let me know and we'll discuss it, but the camera's on. So we started talking last time about marketing and branding and your groups. And this time we're going to talk about, so we started by a discussion of marketing. And I told you that I thought the answer to the question that I asked you, which is what makes this class different than any other, is that it combines two disciplines that you know something about the minute you walked in the door. Unlike other classes where you probably didn't know that debits were on the left and credits were on the right before you took your accounting class, or if you did, it's because somebody had told you that information in advance. But from the day you were born until the day you die, you've engaged in marketing and you've engaged in value judgments, right? At the point at which you become aware of things. And so how we learn about those value judgments increases as we go along and we progress through our life, from concrete, which is you understand it in terms of reward and punishment, to more and more abstraction. So today we're going to talk about why it is that we should study ethics and marketing. And this question has come up a lot. And I'm going to use an example that's probably not in the most recent version of your textbook. So you can get the textbook now online. One of the things that textbook publishers do is they want to have everything online because you can't sell the textbook back, but you're welcome to go and buy any of the old editions of the text. And the case that I'm going to talk about is really one of the cases that started my interest in thinking about this from a business perspective. And when I became a business professor, one of the things that allowed me to start teaching this class. So when I became a business professor years and years and years ago, I was not a business professor to start out with. I was working in the Office of the Legal Counsel. I was an attorney for the university and I taught in political science. So I taught all of the law courses in political science. I taught things like criminal law and procedure, administrative law, constitutional law, things like that. And those were fun classes to teach. I enjoyed teaching those classes. And then I noticed one day that the marketing faculty member that I knew got a huge pay raise because we used to have something called a pay card here at UCO. And everybody basically, based on your rank and your degree, got paid the same, whether you were an English professor or a marketing professor, and we couldn't hire any marketing professors or business professors. So they went off the pay card and those people got a huge pay raise. And I thought, well, I can do that. And I went off and I got my PhD in marketing and I came back to UCO and I got a job here as a full-time faculty member in the Department of Marketing and worked my way up from assistant professor to associate professor to full professor. But when I first started teaching in the College of Business, I asked to teach a course in ethics, and both the department chair and the dean at the time, the first time I asked to teach this class, said our students need substantive skills that they're going to go out in the market. It's highly competitive. They need to know how to do things that are going to actually matter. And then a couple of things happened, and the biggest one was something called Enron. So I realize that this is an odd way of doing this, and I'm going to tell you why I'm having to do this rather than launch the program, just so that you know, so that you don't think that I am completely technologically inept. Because this course was online at one point in time, And it's gonna be online again. It'll be offered online again as soon as it goes back through our continuing education department. I did narrated PowerPoints, which is the little speaker thing. If I launch the program, you should be able to turn the speaker thing off and stop the automatic slide from going, but it never works. And so, and I've tried literally copy and pasting the slides into a new PowerPoint, and it always picks up the entire data, including the voice, and it copies the whole thing, even though I've done individual slides. I've tried copying and pasting the whole thing. So I just have to go back through and like recreate each slide, and I'm inherently lazy. So I'm gonna do it this way. If I don't launch the program, it doesn't start with the narrated PowerPoint. It doesn't automatically advance the slides. I know, again, you should be able to. I'll show you just so you know that I'm not making this up. If I launch it, what will happen? Like, you should be able to go in here and say, let's see, what is it? Pause. See, I hit pause. You can still hear it. Just so you know. So we'll just end the show. But Enron, WorldCom, and Tyco occurred, and all of a sudden there was this huge interest and emphasis on ethics in business. And so the department chair at the time and the dean came back to me and said, you know that class that you've been talking about that you want to teach in ethics, would you be interested in doing it now? Because AACSB, which we were trying to get, which is an accreditation, has now become very interested in ethics and ethical failures as a result of Enron. Now, for many, many, many years, I would ask my students if they understood Enron, and everybody would shake their heads yes, but you all probably, because Enron happened at the beginning of the 21st century, don't remember, because you're probably too young. If you were alive at the beginning of the 21st century when Enron collapsed, you were probably exceedingly young and too young to remember this event occurring. So what happened was Enron was this energy producing company. It was one of the largest Fortune 500 companies at the time that it then filed for bankruptcy protection on December 2nd, 2021. And it turns out, were engaging in financial and accounting manipulation in order to make their books look better. And what they were using was called special project entities, which was these spin-offs that they would fund with Enron stock that were shell companies that they used to transfer the debt to these corporations. And they were accumulating this debt and basically not reporting it, finding ways of not reporting it. And then, like many schemes of this nature, it all came crashing down. And Enron went from being this, Fortune 500 company to being nothing, to being non-existent. And everybody who was in the company that had their stock invested in the 401ks was locked out of their account. They weren't allowed to trade. And they went from being millionaires one day to being broke overnight. It affected an enormous number of people. At that point in time, business schools started becoming again interested in ethics. And we've seen this go through multiple rounds and iterations with the subprime mortgage industry, for example, and this renewed emphasis in ethics. And one of the reasons that I chose ethics as my stream of research when I went into the PhD program is because I had watched other PhD candidates choose something that was a really hot topic at the time. For example, what's the hot topic? If I asked you today, what's the hot topic in marketing, do you think?
AI.
AI. That's exactly right. AI is the hot topic in marketing because it is a disruptive technology that is greatly impacting the way we go about finding, connecting, and selling to our constituents as marketers. It's not just our constituents, it's the way we go about connecting to each other and promoting our own, image online. How many of you have asked ChatGPT, for example, to come up with a picture of you, to enhance a picture? I asked ChatGPT, for example, to come up with, there was a movie when I was a kid called Big Trouble in Little China with Kurt Russell, who is Goldie Hawn. You all don't even know who Kurt Russell is anymore. He was a big star when I was a kid. And he was very famous. Let me see. This picture that I asked AI to generate of me. So based on that, I just was playing around and thought, so I have this nephew. He is my favorite. I don't have children of my own. And so I took this picture. I'm a licensed commercial pilot. I'll just kind of show you guys. I took this picture and I asked it to come up with a movie poster based on Big Trouble in Little China, except I called it something else, and it did. It came up with this movie poster in about 20 seconds of me and my nephew. We're at the Stillwater Airport there. We flew up in one of my planes and we're looking at all the warbirds that they had on display. And it came up with this AI generated cartoon poster of us in no time at all. People are using this to promote themselves, right? They're enhancing their image by using AI generated, touch-ups of their photos. It used to be that if you wanted to go in and touch up your photos so that you looked better than you did, you had to sort of do it manually through something. I mean, this was a huge deal called Photoshop that allowed you to go in and basically sort of make yourself thinner, make your complexion look better, make your teeth look whiter. You could do all of these things. Now you can do this in a matter of seconds on AI. And people are using these enhanced photos on things like dating apps. Is that ethical? So you're promoting yourself. It's not a business promoting, it's marketing. Is that ethical? To do that? To enhance? We've done this for years to sell magazines. Right? They have done Photoshop basically on individuals. You use different historically. I mean, this is not this manipulation of imagery is not new. In the past, they did it through lighting in a photo shoot. I remember when I was a kid, one of the big things to do that every woman seemed to do, and some men did it at the time, was there was this thing in the mall called glamour shots. And they took you, and everybody had the same one. I remember the pose distinctly. They would put you in a jacket and you'd go like this, and they would take a picture of you, with your best side, going like this, holding the collar of the jacket up. Everybody had these photos in their house. It was oh, you've been to glamour shots. That's manipulation, right? They would do your hair, your makeup, put you in clothing, position you so that it's just the right way, use the lighting so that it captures the best image of you, and then they could touch it up or whatever. And it was you, but not you. We've done this for a long time. Now AI does it really, really quickly. And so we're seeing this manipulation of images and persuasion being used, and it's highly effective. And so what we see is that there is this perennial interest in ethics as a result of these ethical failures that have occurred over time. And Enron was not the first. Like I said, it was not, and it will not be the last. And the subprime mortgage industry scandal was not the first, and it won't be the last. As long as we have people, we'll have this ethical failure. And so what I noticed when I went into the PhD program was because there's always these ethical lapses, my stream of research was probably not going to dry up the way other kinds of research and marketing had, that I've known people who started out, for example, in the early 2000s, it was the .com era of the .com. If you had a good, slick website, you could attract interest in that website and sell really nothing, and have an IPO and launch a company and make millions of dollars with nothing really behind it. And all those .coms went away because they didn't really have anything to sell. They had slick marketing, they had slick trademarks, they had good websites, but nothing really behind it to sell. And so these kinds of ethical failures that we see in Enron, WorldCom, Tyco, subprime mortgage industry, now the manipulation of consumers using AI is a huge thing. Fundamentally, those kinds of issues are perennial issues and ones that are not likely to go away. And so that's one of the reasons that I chose ethics as my sort of stream of research when I became a marketing scholar. So why study ethics? Business has become increasingly complex. That complexity has led to a lot of times us saying things like we need to teach substantive courses in marketing, things like how to use AI, how to use social media marketing, rather than looking at ethics. But those who say that then experience ethical failures when we use artificial intelligence to manipulate consumers in ways that we had heretofore not been able to. And they come back to, well, maybe we ought to start teaching these courses in ethics. Ethics does seem to be less relevant in the modern world as a result of these concrete technologies that we now have to face. But I would argue that those technologies, in many instances, just make it easier for us to engage in the manipulation as marketers. Now, I am not one. There are a lot of marketing scholars who focus on ethics, and they tend to be very negative about their view of marketing as a tool. And they view it as solely a tool of manipulation. My position on this is that marketing is a tool like a hammer. You can take a hammer and you can use it to build a house. You can also use it to kill somebody, right? It's how you use the tool that impacts whether or not the tool is. The tool itself is amoral. It is beyond ethics. It's the use of the tool that impacts whether or not it is ethical. Philosophical ethics does appear to be subjective. As I said last time, you didn't know when you walked into your first geometry course that if you had a rectilinear triangle and one side was 3 and one side was 4, that the other side had to be 5. That doesn't come to you intuitively. You have to know it. You have to learn it. It's called the Pythagorean theorem, right? This is concrete. This is the answer is always going to be 3, 4, 5 if you have a rectilinear triangle that's 3 inches, 4 inches on 2 sides. The third side has got to be 5, right? That holds true. Ethics doesn't seem to be that way. We can talk about things that if I ask you really hard questions, we're going to find that people have lots of different opinions on that. So for example, I was talking this morning with one of my colleagues, and we were talking about this very topic about, ethics research and how it's not really gone away the way other streams of research have in the field of marketing, where we saw, again, at the beginning of the 21st century, a huge interest in just everything.com. This .com marketing was the big thing. And it's not that online marketing has decreased, right? It's just that the ability to sell something based on nothing more than potential has largely gone away. Although there are websites that have never made profit that are being marketed and are being sold, but the extent to which that is occurring is far less than it was at the beginning of the 21st century. So I was giving an example of someone I knew. So I teach sales. I teach in the sales program. We have a competitive sales team. We're the #1 team the last 2 years in a row in terms of wins at national competitions. And so that's impressive. It's one of the things that UCO can say we are #1 in, right? OU can oftentimes tout their football program as being highly successful, one of the most all-time successful football programs in history. We can't say that about our football team. I don't know that anybody even watches our football team. If you're on the football team, I've had football players. Are you on the football team?
Yeah.
Sorry. I don't know what our stats are in terms of overall, historic wins in terms of football at UCO. At one time, we were actually pretty good when we weren't D2. We used to belong to a different Athletic Association, and we actually were fairly successful at that time. We were NAIA. I don't know if the NAIA even exists anymore. Does it?
Yeah, it does.
It does? Okay. We were actually pretty successful. So, you can tout this. We can tout that we have this fantastic sales program and that we get students jobs and that we've got the most wins of any program currently in the last 2 years. So one of the things that we teach people how to do in selling, it's usually business to business sales that we're focusing on, is how to engage the decision maker in a way that promotes our product or service. Well, so I have this friend, his name is Adam. I own a business in Guthrie that I inherited from my family. And he was our representative for US Foods for a long time. So we have a restaurant in this business, and my mother started this business many, many years ago. And he is the salesperson that we dealt with at US Foods. And when I first started talking to him, I was, talking about, he noticed that I like Disney and I've been to Disney a lot. And he asked, where I like to stay. And he was telling me that he wanted to take his family, because he had young children at the time that were about to turn towards the age where they would really be interested in Disney. Disney is one of those places that if you're too young, it's kind of a waste of money to get your kids in the park. But at about 8, 9 years old, they're like prime for Disney, because they still believe in the magic, and Disney is the most magical place on earth, right? And he wanted to take he had a couple of kids that were about 8 or 9, wanted to take his family, and he had figured out that he needed to sell an extra case of meat in a year to be able to pay for the commission on one extra case of meat every week. Would pay for his entire trip to go fly all of his family, 2 kids, 2 adults, stay on Disney property at the hotel that he wanted to stay at, get access to the parks for a week, and go to Universal and do all the stuff that you can do in Orlando. That's a lot of fun. And if you've never been, it's an incredible experience. Disney is an incredible experience. It's amazing how in the most unreal place, because it's all a facade, it feels completely authentic. It's an incredible experience, particularly, like I said, if you're about 8 or 9 years old, where you don't, start looking for the strings that are behind the curtain, so to speak. Well, in order to sell an extra case of meat a week, he has ranges in the margins that he can charge to various companies that are buying this product. He sold mostly in Western Oklahoma. That was his territory. And he could manipulate the range of the cost of goods sold to various restaurants in order to make it more attractive for them to buy one extra case of steaks a week. Now, on the face of it, this doesn't seem to have an enormous amount of ethical import, does it? I just want to sell, so I'm going to sell. Well, when you do that and you start promoting this, are you violating the obligations that you have when you're taking your needs into account and your family's wants into account? Are you in conflict with the needs and wants of the shareholder that owns US Food? Maybe. Because maybe you're not maximizing the profit that you could get, because if you're discounting, so you have a range that you have to sell between, and they would allow salesmen to make and have a great deal of discretion within that range in order to sell product, in order to move product. You're now focused on what you want, your goals, rather than maybe the goals of the shareholder, right? You're also maybe not being completely honest with the purchasers of your product. In that you don't tell them what the floor is. That if you told them my range is, they're gonna say, well, I want the 30% markup as opposed to the 50% markup. And they're gonna, if you told them that, should you tell them that? I don't know. So this appears to be really subjective. Just a simple example like that, I bet we would have lots of different answers as to what we should think of in terms of whether or not it's ethical to sell extra cases of meat based on discounts that you can give to your customers and your own personal wants and desires as opposed to what the company wants. What the shareholders want you to do is to maximize, they want you to get the highest margin on that product that you can get to increase the profitability of the company, right? And if they're rational actors, that's what they want. And so ethics appears to be very subjective, which makes it really, really difficult. A lot of times you'll hear people say things like, it's not rocket science. Marketing is not rocket science. And they think that what they're saying is rocket science is really hard and marketing is really easy. I have colleagues who say this kind of thing to me. They're like, why is it that the easy disciplines get paid more than those of us in physics? Over here, easy discipline. Physics is really pretty easy. It seems hard because a lot of us have a fear of math. That's why I became a lawyer. My mother said, you can either be a doctor or a lawyer, you choose. And by doctor, she meant the kind that can write script, right? Not PhD. She told my brother and I, you can either become a doctor, those are your two choices, you choose. Doctor or lawyer. And my brother was supposed to be the doctor. She ended up with two lawyers. And the reason she ended up with two lawyers is because I was horribly afraid of math and my brother was lazy. It seems if we look at things like, I mean, I'll give you a standard formula that we use a lot in the social sciences, for example. Let's see if you can, see if you can recognize this formula. I really wish people would throw markers away rather than just put the cap back on them and put them over there. We'll see if I can find one that's gonna work. Anybody know what that is? It's math, hard. I don't know about physics math, but I do know about this math.
Finance?
No, well, you do use it in finance. We use it in all kinds of business disciplines, and they use it in physics too, I think. I don't know.
Standard deviation.
It's the standard deviation, right? This is the formula. So what this tells us, what this formula tells us is how alike a set of numbers is. It's what's called a measure of dispersion, as opposed to a measure of central tendency. So measures of central tendency are like the mean, median, mode, and range. That will tell you how, like what sort of the center of this data set is. This formula will tell us how alike those numbers are. Is there a big standard deviation or are the numbers tightly grouped together? When you start running things like regression, it will calculate something called the standard error of the estimate in a simple regression. It will do it for multiple regression as well. But the way regression works is it plots, if you have just a simple regression with two variables on it, so you have an X and Y, and you have these known cases, and they are plotted on this thing, and then regression attempts to fit a line in between those known cases So one of the first regressions that I looked at when I was in political science was models that predicted presidential elections. So you look at the vote total for the winning candidate and the GDP of the economy. And it turns out, actually, it's not the winning candidate. You look at the vote total for the incumbent party and the GDP, and it turns out that there's a pretty good fit between GDP and winning. In other words, if the GDP is good, if you have a high positive GDP, I'm simplifying the model, this is called the Abramowitz model. If you have a high GDP, the incumbent party is likely to be retained in power. Why is that? If the economy is good, if the GDP is high, the incumbent party is likely to be retained in power. Why? Turns out GDP is a good predictor of whether or not people are satisfied with the way government is. At least this was going back 25, 30 years ago. That may not be true now because we've become so tribal that other things are impacting the sort of presidential races. But 25 years ago, they looked at, GDP, historic trends, and whether or not the incumbent party stays in power. The standard error of the estimate will tell you how far the distance between these known points, the average distance between these known points and the line, how good the fit of the model is, how tightly associated in the standard deviation the numbers are around that measure of central tendency, which is the mean. And the reason I say this is because students look at these formulas and they think like that's hard. Math is hard. I thought that. Math is hard. With computing power, math is really easy now. When you don't have to calculate these things by hand, they're calculated in the blink of an eye by a computer. And that's a very simple formula compared to, for example, a structural equational model where you have literally maybe thousands of cases and you're trying to calculate these things for multiple regressions. That seems hard. Physics seems hard because there's a lot of math. But fundamentally, physics is pretty easy because it operates within these very well-known constraints. When we say it's not rocket science, I'm like, yeah, that's right. It's a lot harder than rocket science because we know with a great deal of precision whether or not we're going to be able to send a rocket into space and bring it back. For a long time, we couldn't, right? Now, they're sending rockets up, and those rockets are coming back and landing precisely where they took off. That seems really hard, but if you understand the math, it's not that difficult. Whereas looking at why it is that you choose to buy something turns out to be enormously complex. Think about the decisions you make every day. Why is it that you eat the things that you eat? Can you name one factor? Why is it that you like the things that you like? In terms of, you're going to leave this class. This class goes from 9:30 to 10:45. So about an hour after this class is traditionally when most people go to lunch. You're kind of programmed to get hungry around noon as a result of societal influences. Why is it that we eat lunch around noon? Should you eat lunch around noon? It's just kind of historically when people ate lunch. What led to that? Anybody know why we eat lunch around noon?
Is it a break halfway in the workday? You do.
Yeah, it's kind of, but it goes back even further, like to our agrarian, right? You get up in the morning and you eat breakfast, you break the fast so that you can go out and you can work. And about midday when the sun is, you're hungry again and you eat, and then you go back out and you plow the farm, the fields, or harvest the fields or whatever it is you're going to do, until sundown, and then you eat dinner. Is that the best idea? I don't know. 3 squares a day. That's what we have forever and ever, now, as a result of the fact that we don't go out and work in the fields and we are in offices and there are refrigerators at our desks in many instances, or down the hall or in a break room. People have started experimenting with all kinds of different things. There's this theory that, you shouldn't eat 3 meals a day, you should eat 5 small meals. That was a big diet fad that I remember. Don't eat a big meal, eat 5 small meals a day. The theory was impact or have less of an impact on your blood sugar, your blood glucose levels. And the theory was also that as a result of that, you'll eat less. If you eat 3 meals a day, you start out, you break the fast, so you've been asleep for, in theory, 8 hours, and you're probably hungry, so you break the fast, right? That's why it's called breakfast, break the fast. And then you'll get hungry around noon, and then you get hungry around 6 or 7, 5, 6, 7, somewhere in there. You eat 3 meals a day. Well, once we didn't have to go out and plow the fields, because we've got machinery that does that, and we don't have a huge number of people, we can try different things, right? So we can try experimenting with 5 meals a day, because people are indoors and they're, before, historically, if you were working in the fields, it was inconvenient to stop, put down the plow, go back to the farmhouse, eat, and then go back out to the fields. But so they came up with this idea, some dietitians, that what we needed to do was eat 5 small meals, because what was happening, the theory was, I think, that from some of the research that I read, was that if you eat 3 meals a day, you are ravenously hungry at each of those times. And as a result, you eat more than you might if you were eating 5 smaller meals throughout the day. There's some logic to that, isn't there? You're not, if you have breakfast, let's say you get up at 6 because you have to be at work at 8. So you get up at 6 and you have a small, like a power bar or a protein shake in the morning to get you going. And then you have something at 9:30, 10 o'clock, and then something at, noon, and then something at 2 o'clock, and then dinner at, 5 or 6 o'clock, and then another light snack right before you go to bed. Maybe you'll eat fewer calories because you're not building up this hunger. I don't know. That was, I think, the theory. Does it work? Maybe, maybe not. That's what makes it more difficult in marketing. Those diet plans are a marketing idea. I have this friend, she's constantly thinking about, she's getting older, and she's constantly trying to maintain her health. And she's also we're on the treadmill the other day at the gym, and she's talking about macros. I mean, this is the latest thing. She's talking about a macro. She's got to get all these macros in. What? I mean, yeah, well, it's like macrobiotics or something. I don't know. And there's a million different reasons why people are attracted to this or that. And we may not even know ourselves why we do things. Why is it that you do the things? It's really, really hard. It's easy to get a lot if you understand the math. And if you understand what is necessary based on that math to get that rocket into space, it's really easy to understand why somebody buys something. That can be influenced by things that they are not even aware of, that they're not even thinking about. Why is it that you buy stuff at the store? I mean, we know some things. We can explain some things. Like, we know as consumers that one of the things that you should do, right, or at least we think we know, that as consumers, one of the things that you should do when you go shopping is you shouldn't go when you're hungry. I know this from being a marketing professor for 20 years now. I know that I shouldn't go to the store
when I am starving to death, because what's gonna happen when I get to the store?
Buy everything.
I'm gonna buy a lot of stuff that I really don't need. Cause it all, if you're hungry, it all looks good, doesn't it? Ice cream looks really good. Really not good for you, at least not in large doses. But I still do it. I'll still be, wait until the end of the day when I headed home, ravenously hungry, stop by the store and buy all kinds of stuff. And why is it that I buy that thing as opposed to something else? I don't know. I happen to walk by the ice cream first and see it before I saw the cereal. Maybe. That's really hard to figure out. And it does seem, and philosophical ethics appears to be very subjective. If I ask you about, is it ethical to place products in such a way throughout the store as to influence buying decisions, that's a really hard question to answer. Because it turns out a lot of those products are not real good for you. Is the promotion of dairy a good idea? Is there any other animal that consumes milk after the weaning? The answer is no. Is it good for you? 15 years ago, there was a whole campaign where they had all of these famous people with a glass of milk and a white, milk mustache. And the campaign was milk, it does a body good. Does it? I don't know. Most people are slightly lactose intolerant. Why? Because most mammals don't consume, almost no mammal consumes another mammal's milk product, except humans. I don't know. Is it good for you? If we ask these kinds of questions, they seem to be really, really hard. It seems to be more subjective than things like the standard deviation or the standard error of the estimate. So a lot of people say, well, we can't really know any of this, right? But I think we can. We can argue, we can make good arguments, and we can have proofs in ethics if we think about these things from a logical perspective. Are we going to be able to answer the questions like, is there a right answer? If I give you a list of numbers and I say, this is the universe, right? So if I say, what is a population? The answer from a statistics standpoint is a population is a well-defined collection of units. So if I say here's a population, right, like the United States, calculate the standard deviation, and then I give you this formula, which we normally don't see. It's I minus the mu squared over n minus 1 to the nth. We normally don't see this because populations are really hard to sample. It's really hard. We have every 10 years in the United States, we have something called a census. It's not really a census. A census is defined as the sampling of the entire, not the sampling, it is the data collection of an entire population. That's really hard to do in the United States. We get really close. It's a really big sample. It's not actually a census. Why is it a really big sample and not a census? It's impossible to get every single person in the United States to respond. Why? They're not there that day. When the census people come, they refuse to fill out the forms. They don't participate. Why? They don't like the government. And there's lots of reasons. It's hard to find the homeless. We try. They send census takers out to look under bridges and things like that and try to get people to respond. Really, really hard to get all of it. It'd be really easy to say, we define a population as this group of students in marketing ethics rolled in the fall semester of 2025 at the University of Central Oklahoma. That'd be really easy to if we define the collection of units that way, that would be really easy. But to say like, let's get everybody in the United States. So normally we take samples of the population, which means that you get S equals sigma x I minus x bar squared over n minus 1. Because you lose 1 degree of freedom for a sample. So if I give you this number, if I say we're going to take a census, so we'll use this formula up here. We're going to take a census of the marketing ethics class at the University of Central Oklahoma at 9:30 in the morning, right? We could do that. It'd be pretty easy to do that because we know what the absolute population is, and we could get that. And if I gave you that number, so let's say we're going to take a sample of, which we did, not a sample, we took a census, not a sample, we took a census of everybody in here by giving them something called the EPQ, the Ethical Position Questionnaire, and a pretest, knowledge-based, we can get that. And I can give you the scores from that, and we can figure out what the standard deviation is. And if you come up with different numbers, if you come up with a different number than you, we can look and figure out where we went wrong in calculating this formula. And we shouldn't go wrong because you all have calculators. If you have, how many of you have a financial calculator? How many of you had finance? So you had an E36B, is that what the standard is that they use in finance anymore? That's what they used when I took finance years and years ago. This Hewlett Packard, not what you used. No, what you use?
Some Texas instrument one.
Texas Instruments, okay. Well, Hewlett Packard used to make the finest like financial calculators, and I think it was called an E36B. Although maybe that's my flight computer from when I was using an actual like slide rule flight computer. When I learned to fly, we actually used these manual flight computers that are a slide rule, basically. I'll show it, I'll bring one and show it to you. Maybe that was the E36B. Trying to think with it. But anyway, you got this financial calculator that you can plug in, you give it the numbers, and you hit a button on it, and it produces the standard deviation for you. And if it doesn't, there's something wrong. You know, if we get different numbers, we've either entered the data incorrectly. If there's a difference between yours and yours, you've either hit the wrong data. We can try it again, figure out that you misentered a variable, right? Or you did the formula wrong. But we can figure out where it goes wrong. Really hard to figure out where it is that you went wrong in terms of figuring out why it is that somebody bought Dawn dishwashing detergent over Palmolive. I suspect that the reason most people buy Dawn versus Palmolive is what? It's what their parents used.
Ducks.
Huh?
The ducks.
The ducks, right? The ducks, yeah, that's worth a duck, by the way. You know, like the response, it's the Dawn is used as an environmental, I've only put one student's eye out with the duck. Right? That's why I throw underhanded rather than like baseball. Why is it that we buy Dawn? I don't know. That's what I buy is Dawn. It's what my mother used growing up. It cuts through grease. I remember that. That's one of the things that they advertised. You'd see this big greasy, like one of their ads was this big greasy bunch of dishes, and they'd put a drop of Dawn, and it would just like the grease would go away, right? So it seems harder, but it's not impossible. We can come up with good proofs, I think, in ethics. And the way we do that is we look at these three great questions. These are the three great questions that that philosophy attempts to answer. So what is philosophy? When we categorize things and we start to teach them, particularly at a college level, what we're looking at is how do we define the scope of that discipline? And I suppose philosophers could argue with my three questions that I think that philosophy attempts to argue, but I think most of them would agree that these are the things that we try to figure out and then apply to the substantive field of marketing. So the three great questions that philosophy attempts to answer, in my opinion, and these questions are relevant to all people at all places at all times, are the question of knowledge. What is it I can know? And how can I know it? So this question is divided into two subfields in philosophy. The question of what is it I can know is epistemology. And then there's another subfield, which is what is reality? That's called metaphysics. What is it I can know and how can I know it? Epistemology. What is the study of reality? Is this real? Is this experience that we're having in this room real? Or is it a grand illusion? You think it's real, but is it? It turns out these questions are harder than we think, particularly when we talk about things like marketing. When we think we really know something, maybe we don't. What is this?
Table.
Okay, you said table. Why do you think it's a table?
Just based on like past knowledge, I would assume.
Okay. Is it a table? What makes it a table?
4 legs and the
And it's
Like
standing.
All tables have 4 legs?
No, maybe it has 3 legs.
It could have 3 legs. This one happens to have, I think, well, it kind of depends on how you count legs. It kind of has 4.
Oh, it's got a flat.
Oh, no, it does. I'm looking at it. I wasn't looking closely enough at this one. It does have actually 4 because they are split.
I would say it's a flat surface that people go to do activities. That's why like a side thing, an ottoman isn't a table because I don't do my homework on the ottoman. I do my homework on.
Never done your homework on the ottoman?
I've never done my homework on the
You've
ottoman
never put your computer down on the ottoman and
No.
sat there while you're watching Glee?
because it's too low to the ground personally.
I, you know, like I sit there and watch all the time television and work on my laptop, which I put on lots of things that are not tables. Why isn't this a desk? A desk is what you do multiple activities on, isn't it?
The desk is individual usually.
Really, what about a partner's desk? Never seen a partner's desk, huh? They used to make these devices for people like lawyers. Lawyers oftentimes had partners in law firms. Why a lot of law firms are named like my law firm is Aguirre, Morelli and Associates. So they made these desks back in the day, you know, like not the 21st century, at the beginning of the 20th century, where 2 people could share it. It had drawers on both sides. It was wide enough that you could both fit your legs under the middle area. Let's see if I can find a picture of a partner's desk. So you think desks are individual? See if I can find an example. Yeah. Keeps coming up with these pop-ups. This is probably a classic partner's desk. It would have, you can see it's open on both sides, and it would have drawers on the other side as well if you rotated it so that both partners could store things and work together.
It still gives an individual space for each person.
Huh?
It still gives an individual space for each person.
Yeah, you have like a designated.
You put a line down the center of it, don't move your stuff over that line. That is my area. Okay,
Cause you wouldn't switch back and forth every day.
no,
You would have places you would go to every time, like you would have unofficial, this is my side of the table and this is your side of the table. That
but
would
you
just
said it's
naturally-
a table, it's not a
Oh.
table, it's a
It looks
desk.
like a table, it could be, it looks like it could be a fancy table, which.
That's not a that is a desk. Why is it a desk?
I would say it's more for the compartments.
Oh, it has
The
drawers
drawers,
that
yeah.
make it a desk. Okay, so no tables have drawers.
Tables really don't have drawers.
They do, absolutely. I have a 5th century French country table in my house that has a drawer in the end. Do you know why it has a drawer in the end? Because that's where you stored flatware. What's flatware?
Silverware.
Silverware. Why do they call it flatware? It's not flat. Is it? Have you ever seen silverware that's flat?
Oh no.
Weird ones.
Huh?
Weird ones.
Weird ones? I've never seen silverware that was flat.
Knives are flat.
They're-
Not really. It's got a handle
That's
that's like chunkier than the blade usually, isn't it?
not always.
It
The knife
depends.
is
Butter
flat-
knife.
Flat, right, the knife.
It's flat? Let's look at knives.
The plastic knives are flat. It's
Not really.
I think I have a cheap Walmart butter knife that's flat.
Let's look at. Any of these examples?
Oh, come on, you gotta look
Oh,
up
yeah,
flat
yeah.
knife.
Look up flat knife.
Okay. If I can type. Still not coming up with anything.
There are no flat
That's
knives.
fleet.
Put flat handled knife. That'll fit the standard.
Well, it would help if I.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Flat handle butter knife.
Still not seeing anything that's really flat. If you think about it, even plastic knives, which you think are flat, the handle end usually has some like little rim around it. I don't know.
You could cut that part off and it would still be a knife though. So I could just chop it and then. I'd
No,
have a
if
flat
you
knife.
cut that part off, it's not a knife, it's a blade.
Wait, have you ever eaten at Ayers?
No.
Like the little calf here, okay. They
No.
have some pretty flat knives if I've ever seen them.
We'll bring one next time. So apparently you eat there
I'm
frequently.
not stealing, I'm borrowing.
They call it flatware. I don't know why it's called flatware. Like, if they called dishes flatware, I could see that, although they're technically not completely flat either. So you see, this is harder, this idea of the question of knowledge is harder than we think. So a big portion of my research focuses on something, I'll give you an example of this, and we test, right? So, let me see this, 4 sites. See if I can find the EPQ. This, and I will. This is a well-known instrument. Look at item number 18, and I'll see if I can blow this up. Can you all read item number 18? Can you read it? Can everybody read it? You can also look at the back if you can't read it. Rigidly codifying an ethical position that prevents certain types of actions could stand in the way of better human relations and adjustment. So this is a widely used item. I've used it in my own research a lot. I've used this scale a lot. because it comes up with a nice 2x2 matrix. So where you have high and low scores. So it measures two things. It measures whether or not you're relativistic and you're ideological, like whether or not you're an idealist versus a realist, and whether, so if you have high levels of idealism, so it comes up with a 2x2 matrix where you have low and high, basically, it looks like this. And it has idealism, and then relativism. And when you combine two scales, so there's 10 questions per scale, 20 items. When you combine, so one scale measures whether or not you're idealistic versus sort of realistic, and the other measures whether or not you have high levels of relativism versus levels of absolutism, and you can plot based on where people fall in these quadrants, and then you come up with a sort of taxonomy of whether or not they're relativists, whether or not they're situationalists. So there's these four categories that you can come up with. It's useful for analyzing, but one of the questions is this one, 18, and there's a big problem. So this is used. The scale is used a lot. I've used it myself, but there's a big problem with this one question in the scale. We think we know what we're measuring, and what's wrong with number 18 in terms of the question. So I'll read it to you in case you can't read it. Rigidly codifying an ethical position that prevents certain types of actions could stand in the way of better human relations and adjustment. What's wrong with that question?
Can I say slightly vague? I guess I'm trying to like, what does it mean like codify? Like what codes are you talking about? Like laws, social codes?
Okay, well,
like-
what it's asking you is if you have any code, the Code of Hammurabi, for example. The Code of Hammurabi says the first duty of government is to protect the powerless from the powerful. Don't know what that means. But then you get the Draconian Code. You know, sort of an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth kind of thing. That seems much more concrete, right? It's just saying coming up with any code and applying it rigidly. And the reason that this is a subset of relativism is that what you're saying is like there are kind of in ethics there are sort of two diametrically opposed positions you can take. One is an absolutist position, and the other is a relativistic position, and that's what this is looking for, right? But there's still a problem with that. So so it doesn't say what the code is. You could say, you know, like we're going to come up with a code that says, you know, well, we can base it on the Bible. If a man lies with a man as with a woman, both of them have committed an abomination. Their blood shall surely be upon them. What's that from? Leviticus 18:20. Seems pretty straightforward to me. Right? We'll use that as the code. Easy to apply. Your blood shall surely be, I mean, like, you know, it doesn't matter what the code is. It's just whether or not like, oh, is there an exception to that? No. Or maybe. I don't know. That's what it's looking for. It doesn't matter what the code is. If you steal, we cut off your hand. Or if you steal, we put you in prison. It doesn't matter what the code is. We can come up with either of those. But you steal, you go to jail. No exceptions. If you steal, we cut off your hand. No exceptions. That's rigidly codifying something. Anybody else spot the problem?
Always for the better of human relation.
Okay, you're close. You're getting closer there with what the problem is.
Is it the fact they're trying to find something objective, but it's kind of subjective in the way that they're talking about like better?
Okay. Better. Okay. That
It's
could be
better
subjective.
suggesting that like there is an objective better thing when
Okay.
different people
I
are
guess
gonna
that could be a problem. So I gave you a duck because what is better? Better is got to be relative to something else, but there's something that's more fundamentally problematic with this question. Are these the same thing? Human relations and adjustment. Are they the same thing? You're shaking your head no, they're not. They're not. This is what we call a double-barreled question in research. A double-barreled question is one that asks two things in one question, and you should avoid it. Why? They're not the same thing. Human relations is how I interact with you. That's human relations. Adjustment is what? It's an internal characteristic. Whether or not I am internally consistent. Those are not the same things. Sociopaths oftentimes can, for long periods of time, have really good human relations. There's a book out called The Sociopath Next Door. Are they well adjusted? Sociopaths are generally good at manipulating people, so they may be good at human relations. They are good at talking to people, and they are good at mimicking what we think of as being normal relationships. They can fake empathy. As I understand, I'm not a psychiatrist or psychologist, which, by the way, sociopathology is not listed in the DSM-4 specifically. But as I understand it, psychiatrists and psychologists find it a useful descriptor of certain types of antisocial behavior. And as I understand it, psychopathology is also not listed in the DSM-4. But again, it's a useful diagnostic descriptor of certain types. What's the difference between a sociopath and a psychopath? Psychopaths will kill you. Sociopaths will just manipulate you. If you went over to the psychology department, they would be horrified at my stripped down example. But the point is that they're good at human relations. I mean, you can be really good at you can be a really wonderful outward facing individual and have enormous amounts of maladjustment. Most people would say that sociopaths are really poorly adjusted. They may be good at human relations. They're not good people. They're charming. There are people who attempt to identify all kinds of sociopaths throughout history. They're charming. They're persuasive. They're not well adjusted. It's a double-barreled question. So this idea of the question of knowledge is something that's not trivial. How is it that we can know what it is that we know? We think we know a lot of stuff. Maybe we don't. The second question, the question of governance. And when we talk about the question of governance, we're not just talking about the government. We're also talking about how we organize ourselves in less formalistic ways. What is governance in this classroom? Am I the government? Government is an institution. It is a pervasive institution that makes rules and has the ability to enforce those rules up to including the imposition of death. So am I the government? No. I make rules and I enforce those rules, like you're going to take some tests in here if you want to pass, but I can't impose the death penalty on you. So I'm not the government. Kind of close. So when we talk about governance, we're not just talking about government, we're talking about the way we arrange ourselves. We've chosen to arrange ourselves in such a way that you come to this class, and if you follow the rules that I set out, even though I'm not the government, I'm engaging in governance, and there's an outcome that flows from that, which is you get a grade on this scale that we have defined, right? A, B, C, D, F. So governance is not just about how we go about forming institutions that can impose the death penalty. Some choose not to, but they can. The sovereign can. We do and Oklahoma were fascinated with the death penalty. Not as fascinated as Texas. Texas had no problem imposing the death penalty on Harvey Lee Lucas, who was convicted of a murder that he could not commit because he was in prison in Louisiana at the time the murder occurred. Oops. Not as fascinated as Texas with the death penalty, but we're pretty fascinated with the death penalty in the state. Some places are not. France. Socialistic France, right? They did away with the death penalty quite a while ago. But they could reinstitute it because they are the sovereign. The country itself is the sovereign. So governance, how we organize ourselves is more than just the government. And it's important. And then the question of conduct. What is the appropriate course of conduct? And these three questions are interrelated. So these are the perennial questions of philosophy. What is it I can know? How can I know it? How should we organize ourselves? And then the question of how should I behave within that organization? Is it ethical of me? Once I've decided that I'm going to teach this class and I'm going to organize it, I'm going to give you a syllabus, is it ethical of me to deviate from that syllabus? That syllabus is a contract with you. Is it ethical to deviate from that? Well, the syllabus has an outline in it, right? That says we're going to cover these topics. What if another pandemic hits and we all have to go sit at home and I can't cover all of those topics as a result of the fact that, life is disrupted? Is that ethical? Those are the kinds of things that we'll worry ourselves with in this class throughout the semester. It's important. And these are perennial questions. I am out of time, so I will stop there. If you got ducks, I need to give you points for those. I will take a picture of this to note where I stopped, so I can pick up on a week from Tuesday. I would like for you guys in your groups, and I'll give you some time next Tuesday, to answer the following question. What is, so you want to write this down, what is justice? You might want to start emailing each other through D2L or whatever in your group so you can start talking about this. I'll give you some time in class. What is justice? And what does justice have to do with marketing? So what is the absolute concept of justice? What is it? And what does it have to do with marketing? So think about this idea of governance. Justice is not just about criminal law and procedure, right? You have to think about justice in a broader sense of the word. I'll stop the video there. And if you got ducks, let me get to that page and I will give you your points if you come up and see me.